Tesla SpaceX reveals $16.8 billion Terafab factory. The joint venture's real leverage comes from shared supply chains that neither could secure alone. Production targets point to 5 million Optimus units annually once ramped. That volume shifts the cost curve for inference hardware dramatically lower. NVIDIA now faces a direct rival with captive demand. Expect data center margins to compress as Tesla bundles robo-taxi packages 30% cheaper. Texas power deals already locked in give this effort a 2-year head start competitors cannot match. Watch contract wins shift accordingly. Megapack 3 production begins in Texas. Capacity gains like this hit utilities right where it hurts their legacy contracts. The 28% bump lets Tesla underbid on projects that previously went to gas peakers. Fluence must now either match density or retreat to smaller behind-the-meter niches. Expect the next round of RFPs in the Southwest to carry Tesla-favored terms on cycle life and degradation. Grid operators gain leverage to demand faster deployment timelines that older tech cannot meet. Margins follow the volume. Tesla wins Cybertruck tooling lawsuit. Angstrom's loss hands Tesla the keys to its own production schedule again. Tooling access removes the last major bottleneck on the casting line. Rivian now has to decide whether to accelerate its own vertical integration or accept slower ramps through 2027. Watch for supplier contracts to include stricter tooling escrow clauses industry-wide. Production can resume at full speed within weeks instead of months. That timeline advantage compounds on every subsequent model. Final. Tesla files for $10.1 billion solar cell plant. The 2029 timeline masks how this filing already alters land and permit markets in the region. Vertical integration here bypasses wafer suppliers that competitors still rely on. First Solar faces margin pressure once Tesla cells clear qualification for major offtake agreements. Expect panel prices in North America to fall another 12% by the time operations stabilize. Smaller developers gain a second sourcing option that reduces single-vendor risk. Procurement teams are already modeling the shift. 2026 summer update rolls out globally. Video calls grab the headlines, but the Grok command layer changes how owners actually use the car daily. Natural language navigation tweaks reduce driver interventions on long routes. That improvement feeds directly into higher perceived value for the full self-driving subscription. Competitors like GM's Super Cruise must now match conversational controls or risk losing the narrative on ease of use. Early data from the beta regions already shows a 22% rise in voice session length. Retention curves will reflect it first. New 125 million Megapack facility live in Texas. ERCOT now has a storage asset that can discharge 250 megawatts into evening peaks without fuel price volatility. This undercuts the economics of remaining gas peakers on the interconnection queue. Watch the capacity auction results next spring. Those plants will either clear at lower prices or drop out entirely. Suppliers of flexible load like data centers gain a new hedge they can contract directly against the output. The shift accelerates retirement schedules for older thermal units. Cybercabs spotted in 56 U.S. cities. The geographic spread now pulls in rural highway segments and suburban arterials that controlled test fleets rarely touch. Regulators in 2 additional states will face permit applications within 6 months because the mileage data already exceeds what Cruise accumulated before its pullback. Tesla can therefore claim lower incident rates per million miles on those routes. Existing ride-hail operators must either partner for the data or watch their driver costs stay flat while Tesla's marginal cost per trip falls. Tesla China July wholesale hits record. Shanghai's output ramp now feeds a dedicated export lane to Europe that clears customs with a built-in 12% landed cost edge over locally assembled rivals. Volkswagen therefore faces renewed pressure on its ID3 and ID4 pricing, just as it tries to stabilize dealer inventory. The July volume also signals that domestic demand recovered faster than Beijing's stimulus models projected. BYD must accelerate its own right-hand drive launches or concede the Australia market entirely within the next 2 quarters. Optimus hiring surges to 280 roles. The postings cluster around torque vectoring firmware and thermal management for the actuators, areas where software talent alone cannot close the gap. Figure AI and agility therefore lose senior hires they were counting on for their own 2027 prototypes. Tesla's timeline advantage widens because the same engineers who solved similar problems on the Cybertruck now apply that experience directly. Suppliers of harmonic drives should expect qualification orders to double by year-end as validation cycles compress under the new headcount. Unsupervised robotaxi runs nights in Austin. Headlight reflections off wet pavement and construction signage now enter the training distribution at volume. Waymo must therefore expand its Phoenix night fleet or accept that its safety case lags on precisely the scenarios Austin runs are generating daily. The unsupervised window also surfaces edge cases around emergency vehicle lights that daylight testing undersamples. Insurers pricing rider policies will demand access to these night incident logs before extending coverage to additional cities or adjusting their actuarial tables. SpaceX purchases $295 million to smith over Tesla Megapacks. SpaceX's latest order ties its Mars simulation clusters directly to the same supply chain that runs Tesla's own training racks. That vertical lock-in means any delay at Giga Nevada now hits both companies' timelines at once. The cumulative spend crossing $800 million already signals a multi-year capacity reservation that competitors cannot replicate without new factories. This forces Microsoft-backed energy storage providers to accelerate their own gigafactory plans in the Southwest or accept lower margins on every future contract. California $3,500 EV rebate for Teslas. Buyers who take delivery this quarter lock in the full rebate before the fund runs out in September. Inventory turnover on eligible models has already jumped 18% in the first 2 weeks. The program targets first-time buyers specifically, pulling demand forward and leaving fewer trade-ins for remarketing. That shift undercuts lease packages from legacy brands, forcing Stellantis to match the cash incentive on its own electric inventory or see California market share slide another 5 points by Q4. Tesla officially enters Argentina market. Tariff reductions alone do not explain the timing. Local lithium supply contracts were signed 6 months ago. Service center buildouts in Buenos Aires start next quarter with parts already in transit from the Texas facility. Dealers in Brazil already report early inquiries from Argentine buyers crossing the border. Within 18 months, this entry undercuts BYD's pricing in neighboring Chile and forces them to extend warranty coverage across the region or risk losing the entire Southern Cone market. Europe gets new pre-assembled superchargers. Sites in Oslo and Tilburg went from foundation to charging in 48 hours. Pre-assembly shifts the bottleneck from construction crews to permitting offices alone. The folding design also reduces land lease costs by half at each location. Operators at existing highway stops now face empty bays during peak hours. That speed pressures Ionity to renegotiate its grid connection timelines or watch utilization drop as drivers reroute to the faster sites across northern Europe by next summer. FSD trials offered in Denmark, Netherlands, owners selected in Copenhagen and Amsterdam receive the V14 update with no subscription attached. The trial generates corner case data specific to those road networks that training runs in California miss. Early feedback already shows higher engagement rates than previous European tests. That forces German authorities to fast-track their own approvals or fall behind on autonomous testing corridors before the end of next year, when the next software branch drops. Regulators in Brussels are requesting access to the same dataset. Institutions boost TSLA shareholdings. The filings reveal concentrated buying from just 5 desks, not broad enthusiasm. That concentration tightens the available float for new shorts entering after the earnings beat. Watch borrow fees climb past 30% by October as a result. Existing short positions now face a decision: cover into strength or roll further out the curve at higher cost. Either path compresses downside volatility heading into the next delivery report. Index rebalancers will have to follow suit by year-end. Japan launches Powerwall 3 sales. Regulatory approval came through faster than the local grid operators expected. Homeowners in Tokyo and Osaka now face a choice between utility demand response programs and direct export credits. The difference shows up in monthly bills once export tariffs adjust next spring. Panasonic and other domestic suppliers must either match the 13.5 kilowatt-hour capacity at similar price points or accept share loss in the detached home segment. Utilities lose visibility into household discharge patterns unless they integrate the API by next summer. Colombia Tesla sales strong in July. 7.3% overall share arrived without any dedicated service centers open. That volume concentrates in Bogotá and Medellín, where charging still depends on mall locations. BYD must match the 40% BEV slice with local financing options or lose ground in the next quarter. Legacy dealers now see trade-ins hit their lots for the first time, forcing quicker EV inventory rotations. This also pressures the government to expand highway fast chargers sooner than planned. This extenuating Tesla hires for Terafab and space chips. Space radiation engineer postings rarely appear in automotive job boards. The roles target chip designs that survive low Earth orbit conditions, pointing directly at on-satellite inference hardware. Starlink terminals could run FSD compute locally once those chips qualify, removing the need for constant ground links. That shift lets Tesla monetize autonomy subscriptions in regions with poor connectivity. Radiation-hardened memory suppliers now face new qualification requests by summer. This timeline puts pressure on the supply chain to deliver flight-qualified silicon within 18 months. FSD Korea subscription launch delayed. Mid-August now looks like the earliest the subscription button appears in the app. Local partners still lag on labeling for construction zones and mountain roads that dominate the peninsula. Hyundai and Kia therefore have a narrow window to launch their competing supervised systems at lower price points before Tesla sets the reference cost. Early adopters who waited for the feature may shift to extended test drives of Genesis models instead. The postponement delays regulatory feedback on unsupervised rules by 1 quarter.